Do you have recommendations? I was trying to do some like, do y'all use AI? ChatGPT?
No. Never. Never have.
I mean, hold out if you can.
Yeah, no, I have. I use it for certain things, but
right. That's an incriminating question now. It's good at lyrics. No, just kidding.
Yeah, right. Really good at lyrics. No, actually. That's the one thing I haven't tried any kind of AI music things. I know that there are things out there, but
I have.
But yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh hell yeah.
Whole new Dusters album.
It's interesting. You sometimes got to know, you know. I'm one of those guys who embrace the newest technology because I think it will help me. And then before you know it, I'm way behind on the things. And so
he was the first one to have an iPhone.
We're
like, dude, you got an iPhone?
I need that. You know, I need that tool and that opportunity it gives me. But then later I am behind.
Yeah. Well, but yeah, we AI is good for certain things, like, I just planted some, when's a good time to plant grass seed in Long Island, and that kind of thing. I think, always got to kind of you always got to double check on Safari. But when you're an artist, whether it's like, music or if you're a painter or whatever, I mean, it's not so much just about the finished product. It's about the journey to get there.
Yeah.
And so AI will never be able to take away that experience. And that's what it is, the human experience of, the journey of writing music or making music or becoming a musician and all that stuff. That's why you do it, not just to have some end product. And AI is just sort of all about just the end product, from a creative standpoint, and so, they can't take that away from us.
Yeah.
I don't think. I've
used Suno one time. But it was ironic. So I had an artist who did a song that was kind of about, it was if you had to sum it up, it'd be like an anti-AI music song would be what it's about. But the way he frames everything is like, they're coming for us. They don't want you to hear this message that everybody's using this on the sly right now.
Right.
And so at the end of the song, I threw his song through Suno and had it make like the most obvious AI version. Like it switched from being real instruments to being like EDM or something. And instead of a male voice, it's a female voice. And then I crossfaded it so his song turns into the AI version of itself as kind of like a Black Mirror kind of moment.
Right.
They didn't go with that version. He was like, wild, but no, we're not going to do that.
That's pretty wild.
So that's my one use, was ironically because I hate it.
Well, and hey, listen, the thing about it is, like I said, I don't feel threatened by it because I in that sense, because I think that as artists, your goal is a journey. But I think young people, I think they are longing for authenticity, and I think even in this age of like AI time, like where we're, I think people still like the real deal stuff. And I think that young people, when they're making music, probably are going to find ways to use AI as a tool of some sort, but not necessarily replacing the creativity, But how that's going to be, I don't know. I'm old school. I like to hold an instrument. I like to record, like try to use live instruments for recording and, but, just like, with drum machines or something, they figured out how to utilize this in a creative way. I'm sure there were a lot of particularly drummers who didn't like when drum machines came around.
For real, yeah.
So,
yeah, I think that's the deal. Like, we're living in a moment where it's threatening our creativity, our way of life, like other cycles of the entertainment industry have over time. So there's a feeling of, defensiveness, which I totally get. But at the same time, like, man, I love the shit out of some electronic music, and I know they've been doing that shit to us for over a decade, making up stuff with computers and just sending it our way, and it can provoke emotions, and electronic stuff is obviously the easiest to simulate with, electronic stuff. But like you say, I tried a thing with Suno just because I needed to see, and bluegrass instruments got to be tough, right? Like, how do you do the banjo or a fiddle and make it sound real? And they're getting better and better and better at that shit. It's crazy and scary. I wrote this parody song, and I wrote it to the tune. It was political, and we don't need to go into that. But I wrote it about I wrote it to the tune of Roger Miller's "King of the Road."
Oh yeah.
And so, but it was all has to do with what's going on. And I wrote out the lyrics, all of it. And I was just like, I don't really want to make a demo of this with me on it. Uh-huh. So I was like, what if I just like put it through the program? Would they do it for me? And they would. I couldn't get it to do that song, but they came up with 12 other versions of the song and sent it my way. It kind of blew me away in a scary way. Like, it also wanted to correct me on some of the lyrics, which actually were, I hate to say it, but like, good recommendations, because like I had like some pretty much like straight up defamation going on, and it was like, we can't do that, in the lyrics. Like for some reason, the Suno was like, we have to make it this way or whatever. Or
the
song must have been about me.
It was insane. And so, and I haven't, I wouldn't do one of my songs original, of course, but it was just a parody. I was bored one day and just was feeling some feelings, and I was like, fuck, what's going on right now? I want to write about it. And the only thing I could think of was that song, and I was like, I'll just do a parody because that'll be funny, and I needed some humor. And it was an eye-opening experience, and it actually kind of taught me about some of the things that I wrote that I was like, I can't really do that because it's saying, it needs to be this other way. And I still made it my own. But I was kind of blown away by the demos it made me.
Yeah.
The singing sounded like freaking Joe Diffie singing the demo, and it was like freaking banjo, like unbelievable. It's getting better. And, like you said about the sort of young people, I have this nephew and this niece that like to get into making tracks and stuff, and they sit around and they can do this stuff, in an hour, 2 hours. They have like a song or whatever that they like, and it sounds good, and they just run it through these programs. But at the same time, their favorite thing to do is to go to concerts with their friends, And so I feel like people, getting back to where I was starting at, was like, I feel like we're in that generation where like, fuck this shit because it's like threatening our livelihoods and our creativity. Why are they coming for that when they could be going for the mundane shit in life? But the young people won't think about it that way. They'll be just integrating this into their life, and they won't think twice about it. And there's kind of like not a lot we can do about that unless we like teach this, I guess as a thing to try to preserve. But, I feel like hopefully, I guess what I'm saying, I'm not trying to be a nihilist, but I feel like hopefully that, it'll sort itself out a little bit.
But otherwise, we're fucked.
Otherwise,
we're either way. We're just fucked.
But hopefully, people just use it as a tool, and not replace the. I think people are still going to need places to gather together and want to see the real shit. They're not going to, want to see. Some robots playing. Maybe a few times.
A kid put in a prompt.
Maybe it's going to be like, instead of like labels being like organic, it's going to be like, authentically made music.
Yeah.
Right.
No AI was used in the production of this music. And maybe that's going to be sort of a selling point for a thing. Yeah. And some people still go to, go eat at McDonald's, and some people are not going to eat that sort of thing. And they're going to go to the, some people are going to go to the more heady place. And that, I don't know, he has to see. And I guess it's true. It's like, there ain't really nothing. There's nothing you can do about it. I mean, you can't control it. It's out there, and what are you going to do? I mean, I think that it's possible that maybe what's going to happen is at some point when like the business side catches up to all of like the algorithms and the things that they're feeding into AI, and if it gets to a point where they have to pay royalties on that to a vast amount of people or come up with some sort of royalty scheme that then makes it not cost effective. Like I think about like making music for music libraries or something where you wonder, which I've done that kind of stuff. We've done that kind of work, and I've like watched shows that they've used music I've done, and you're like, oh, I want to check it out. And you're like, and it's just like, behind some dialogue and you hear like just like a little bit of this mandolin thing that I played, just like maybe like one or two little notes. You're like, oh, that's it. That's where it was, you know?
Yeah.
Like, why wouldn't they use AI to do that? You know?
You're right.
Like, they probably could. But I think at some point though, maybe right now it might be cheaper to do that, whatever. But I think at some point, if they have to start paying royalties on using the AI and then it becomes more expensive, it's just going to be cheaper and easier just to get somebody to actually to do it.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because I kind of do see both sides, and I'm a creative person. Like if you're like for example, where I run into it, and it's an ethical decision that I've not decided to ever use, which is using like an AI poster. And that's because I have a lot of artist friends, that I know and I respect that that's how they make their living and that kind of stuff. And I don't want to take away from what they do. But at the same time, if I want to do a poster for my solo music, I'm just a little guy. Like I can't really afford $500 to pay somebody for a solo show personally. Like the Dusters, do big stuff. But like when I'm doing my own solo music, which is on a smaller scale, I can't really afford to pay a personal artist to make me the poster. So what ends up having is I just put some crappy looking shit together, when I could just call on AI and do it for me.
I've done it. When I first checked it out, I would do posters and, some of them they looked pretty good. And, I felt the same way. It was sort of like, well, I mean, this is like a side project show. It's just for like social media posts to announce a show. I'm not ever hiring, I'm not like going, oh, I don't have to hire an artist now to do this. I would just be making those things myself. Yeah. They're going to look shittier and it's going to take me 2 hours to do it because I'm not a graphic artist, but that's what I'm going to do. So I'm using this tool to save me those 2 hours to do something, just to make an announcement of a show. And I could put those 2 hours into making music, and why, if people can pay, $8 a month and get all of the music they want to listen to and they don't have to buy records anymore and use technology in that way, why can't an artist that's just kind of like, it's not taking money. But my wife is she's like a fine artist, and she's like, what the fuck, man? Yeah. Like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, I'm like, well, why? She's like, dude, first of all, it looks like shit. It looks like AI. And so she just, now I just kind of use like her artwork. She'll give me art. If I need art for something, she'll do a graphic or something. And then I could either have AI just do the layout kind of with her artwork just for like the text or something. But I don't even really do that anymore because I've realized as long as I have the artwork, and AI did kind of show me some cool looking ways, and not as a graphic designer, I could use that as a guide to see how it might lay it out. And then I could go to like the other app I have and kind of make it with my own fonts and maybe change the fonts but just for positioning and, we did that a little bit. We used AI for we have amazing artwork on our album right now that's coming out.
It's super cool.
No, we didn't. Now that's a great artist that we used to do that. But I think it was the initial idea was maybe my idea that I had an idea for an album cover, and so I was able to just sort of type that into AI, just for like as like a guide to say like, oh, like well, here's what that could look like. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, that's good. So like when I'm explaining the idea to the guys, I'm sending an email, I could just have it render this and say, obviously, this is not what it's going to look like, but this is just like, just an AI
get you in the ballpark,
so that you can kind of visualize sort of the type of thing that we're looking for, and just like so it's kind of using it as a tool just to be able to for me to be able to communicate about art as not being an artist, a visual artist for myself. But
I think that's where we'll lose it if we, as creative people, just give over to it and say, "Here, do this creative thing for me." That ain't working.
No, it's like more like.
But if you can use it as a tool, like there's no stopping it. I mean, even if. Like, I see the like actors and that kind of thing have banded together and have made some strides on being able to probably hold some of that shit up. And musicians could, because we do have some unions and we could somehow figure that out, but it's hard to see us actually banding together for real in that regard to like get everyone to stop playing gigs or something to go on some kind of weird strike.
No, it's just not going to happen.
So it's coming no matter what, and it's not like get used to it or else, but it is like, I guess we're that generational change where that's happening, and it's up to us to sort of, say that how important it is for the real art to remain, and I get it that people are going to want to use these things as tools. I mean, that was tempting as hell for me. I've written thousands of songs, but just to sit down and like, I spent all this after like a couple hours, like writing my parody that I was talking about, but I put that into the machine and it just spit out all this stuff and gave me more verses. And like, it kind of blew my mind. I was like, this is like, it reminds me of like Adam and Eve where they were tempted with the fruit in the garden, man. Yeah. Like you're just like, holy crap, this is going to open the eyes of everything for music. And, if you're just like you say, if you're using it like you're like a store clerk, and you're just like a small time guy and you're like, I need a little jingle or something, put this in here and spit this out, make me a little demo and I'll put it on the, my commercial. Like that's understandable to me if you're a small business owner, because I'm a business owner too, on top of being a creative person. So I get the temptations there, but I feel like the only thing we really have to do about it is figure out how to use it for a tool. And, if I feel like for us being bluegrass musicians, especially, like we have always been true to our own selves and our art. And so that's something that will never change for us. And I feel like some of these tools can be helpful, but I don't see people like us using them as much as the future generations. And
and that's what I mean. And they're going to, and it's not, maybe it's not for us to say how they do their art.
Right.
Maybe it's not.
Right.
It's not.
That's a good point.
No. And it's like we do our art the way we do our art, and it's maybe not for us to say, but they, it is interesting when you think about it, just AI in general as a tool. I mean, in the same sort of vein, our dobro player, we started having these discussions like a few months ago. We were on tour, and our dobro player was telling us how, somebody in Europe or something hit him up, hey, would you play dobro on my track? He's like, yeah, sure, send it over to me and I'll check it out, And so the guy sent the track over and he's listening to it and he's just like fantastic dobro playing going on there. He's like, so he tells the guy, I'll play on the record, but whoever did that, it's really good. I don't know. Do you might not, whoever did that, why don't you just use that? And the guy was like, oh, well, that's AI. That was just like to send you an example of, what it would sound like.
Did he say this on a podcast?
Yeah. He did. Well, on his
social media, I think he was talking about it a little bit.
I heard this somewhere.
Yeah. No, and it was like, and he was so depressed. He was just kind of like, it sounded like Jerry Douglas had played, dobro. And this guy, he's like, and I'm thinking like, that was like awesome. But, but, the guy was just...
He was cool about it. He wanted the real thing.
He was wanting the real thing.
Yeah.
People want the real thing, because people don't want to just say, hey, who's on that dobro? Oh, it's AI. Like, people are going to be like, fuck that, right? So it's like, there is like a little bit of a stigma, I think, of that, and which is good. And so it's like, so the guy had the means to hire somebody. He's going to be releasing this music. He wanted to have a real dobro player on there,
He used it as a tool.
And he used it as a tool to kind of hear what it would sound like for himself and be like, okay, yeah, this sounds cool. So, I want to hire the real thing. And so
that's legit.
And that's legit.
That feels legit.
What's wrong with that,
Yeah. Well, there's also, there's a fine line maybe. It sounds like I'm defending AI, but I'm not. I'm just sort of like debating it because it sounds like, there is a fine line. Like right now, all of us, we're using the latest technology you can use to perform, and a lot of that is AI. Like especially with our imaging stuff, that's all like artificial stuff that's been made to sound like. And so it's almost kind of, or if you're an electronic musician, you're using all kinds of computer generated artificial stuff. A lot of the stuff when you go see the big shows, a lot of that stuff's being tuned on the spot, or with digital reverb, and so like that's AI too. So it's kind of like in a way we're using that as a tool.
Well, it's you know, I mean that stuff though is more like, you know, from a sonic standpoint, you know, it's like it's creating sounds, but I guess the thing is the creative person is still sort of putting those things together to create, you know. But like, you know, but to your point, yeah, I mean it's like if you're using any kind of, you know, okay, even if you're playing a Hammond organ and you're using a Nord instead, theoretically,
I mean, it's just,
not, you know,
right.
I'm splitting hairs and kind of just being, you know, debating about it. But it just kind of feels like, you know, don't remember the olden days, you know, like a little bit, you know what I'm saying? Like here we are, man, like we should have this technology. It's badass. Like
well,
I remember
earlier, like the shirt that I'm wearing is like mass produced. I don't know how but they were able to make it for like probably $5.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But like back in the day, people would have like, I don't know how much clothing cost, but it was a lot. I think I heard. And like they would have like one out because somebody had to like sit there by hand and make it. And so there's probably some low hanging fruit of everything, not just music or art or anything, but there's probably low hanging fruit of like, did they really need you to play mandolin for this budget piece of shit TV show? I'm not saying yours was, but there's a bunch of TV shows that have garbage music, and you're like, they're crappy reality shows.
You don't really need, you know.
But on the high end, people still go when they make a real movie, they're like, get John Williams in here. Right. You know what I mean?
Well, I know for a fact, you know, doing some of that library stuff, you know, they wanted. That was the whole thing, is they wanted authentic music, you know? Yeah. They could have done this in different ways. They could have gotten, you know, used, you know, sort of even like synthesizer banjos and stuff like that, but they want specifically the real deal.
I think that's my point, is like the real shit is always going to have a play. Like people always want the good stuff.
I agree with the sentiment for sure, but I also feel like, God, this shit is getting good. Like the synthesizers we used to play strings, you can tell instantly it's not strings, but now it's getting to the point where it's scary, like actually.
Even like guitar pedal, like modeling, guitar pedal modeling and guitar amp modeling. I mean, when you play that shit, it's like, damn, you know, it's pretty good. You know, maybe I don't need, you know, all these pedals. I could have this modeler and, you know, those things, I guess, who makes them, who makes those things? You know, I don't have one, but
I was thinking of Line 6, but
that's what I'm thinking too. But
right?
I think so. But it was like one of those companies. I forget what it is, and it's like you have like a pedal board, and you can make whatever. And
the Kemper,
that kind of thing, you know. And it's like the shit sounds fucking good. Now I still have Helix, and I still have my my electric pedal board with individual pedals and stuff, and I like that because I'm old school that way. But But I tried one of those things. And when early COVID, like the first time I had COVID, like it was like probably, it wasn't at the beginning. It was like, but at some point, early in that, it was like the first time I had when you're still like, I like quarantined and my brother has like a separate building with like a little studio set up. And so that's where like I quarantined from my family so I was there and he had one of those things in there. He's like, hey, you should check it out if you can. I mean, I was just fucking sitting around all day long, like waiting out COVID. But, and I was like, God damn, man, this fucking thing sounds good, but I see why people do that. But, having individual pedals I still like. But on my acoustic stuff, I mean, I use the Fishman Aura technology, which is, kind of like sampled guitar images, that work with the Fishman pickup in order to make it sound, more like it's on a microphone rather than a pickup. And that technology is amazing, I mean, it's I swear by it.
Well, that's what I mean. It's like, we all know, like, we spend a lot of money on instruments in the bluegrass world because we really care about the quality of the sound we're getting, pulling the tone that we want to get. Yeah. Bluegrass guys are super serious. So are other musicians, but bluegrass guys are super serious about that shit. And to capture that sound has been difficult on a large scale. Like, you can do it on a microphone, it sounds amazing in a small, controllable space. And there's a few bands out there, like the Del McCurry Band, of course, who is like a champion of the one mic sort of setup and has been able to make it work well, even though they use more than one mic, you know, for their setup, but it works great for them. We know through trying that, we tried all these different things, and we were playing these larger spots, and we couldn't get, you know, we were just having Feedback Central trying to do that with microphones. So we had to plug in.
Yeah.
And it started off, in those days, sounded like crap. I mean, everything was just like rubber bands, no matter what I mean, there was a few like analog things you could run through, but especially on fiddle, man, it was terrible. All the pickups and the processing you had to try to do to make it sound like anything. And now, here we are, you know, a couple decades later into this thing, and shit's getting pretty nice. Like, this whole imaging thing that they're doing now for acoustic instruments has really changed the game, you know? And so, in a way, you can't, like, be afraid to embrace some of the technology that comes your way, I think, you know? I mean, I think AI is a special, different thing that's really going to definitely change the game, but not only for us, for sure, but for everyone.
Well, talk to me about your guys' setup. So when you're usually so tonight you're playing at the Opry, which is is it tomorrow?
Tomorrow night. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So that's like they're kind of like their own thing, right? Like, you don't bring in production in your normal.
We were just talking about. No, I think normally when we play the Opry, we just step in front of microphones.
Yeah,
that's what they do. They're good at that, and that's how they
up.
want to do it. So, yeah.
And then last night you were at Station Inn, right?
Right, which we
it's its own thing too.
Well, we did our usual thing there, you know, which we debated because we were like, well, it's Station Inn, you know, because our stuff we all have pedal boards, we all have, you know, we're plugged in, we have in-ear monitors, you know, and that's kind of like what all of our gear is sort of, you know, set up for. Our this guitar, I do use like the DI that goes through the Aura technology, and then I have an internal mic, so I have like a pretty custom setup. So I have two outputs, you know, that come out of the guitar, and so it's like an internal.
You had
microphone.
that added on.
Yep, and it's just sort of a custom thing that I came up with my friends at Bourgeois Guitars, you know, to sort of have two separate, because, you know, I always like to have the microphone to add a little bit of, you know, it adds a little bit of air back into the sound. It also, like, from in the in-ears even, because I think the sound of the DI on its own sounds great, but it still responds like a pickup, even though it sounds kind of like a microphone.
Yeah.
But the response of the instrument is kind of, and so, like, especially and that's very unforgiving in in-ears. In-ears are so unforgiving for like stuff like details like that. So really the main reason why I started using the mic was just for in my in-ears to bring back a little bit of the dynamic range back into the instrument, so it felt a little bit more natural in my in-ears.
And so you've got two outputs, so you send both of those out and they get mixed back.
It goes through a two-channel Grace preamp called a Felix, which basically acts as a blender. And you can do any, you know, various ways of sending that out. You know, you can send it out as a mixer, but it has like two separate DIs into it. So that goes to the house separately, the microphone, and into my ears separately. And I kind of, in my ears, I split it a little bit, you know. So it's a little bit pan. So it gives a little bit of, and the effects that I use, you know, delays or any kind of fun effects like that are only engaging on the pickup side.
Okay, cool.
So the microphone so it's kind of cool, because then if I'm using some kind of effects, you're hearing the effects, but there's also like underneath that, there's like the underlying acoustic sort of microphone guitar, which is, you know, I think unique and cool. And some people, you know, I think even Billy Strings, you know, at one point called me to ask me what I was doing with this setup. And I think he does something very similar to this now, where he's got an internal mic with a separate output.
And what kind of guitar is that?
This is a Bourgeois guitar, Dana Bourgeois out of Maine. And they're making, you know, they've been on the scene a long time, and they're just making, you know, boutique acoustic guitars, just beautiful craftsmanship, great sound.
What's the wood on the top?
So this particular top is a Adirondack spruce top, and then this has, you know, regular Indian rosewood back and sides. So. And they just, you know, this is a beautiful instrument that they made, and you know, I have several of their instruments. I have an OM that's really nice, but I've been kind of back. I kind of shift around, and I've been back on the Dreadnought size. Been kind of into it lately. you know.
Yeah. How many guitars do you play on stage?
I, try to play one,
Nice.
at a time. No, but one, I keep a second guitar on stage when I can travel with it, just as a spare guitar. Because I always I'm a little bit like OCD maybe or something, but I always think with a guitar, if your pickup went out or something, it's not like you can easily, So I like to have a spare if we're on a tour, just because if something happens, I can get through the show. But also if I break a string, I don't carry a guitar tech or anything. So, sometimes, and in a string band, if one of us, we have no drums or anything. So if one of us drops out for whatever reason, whether it be a string breakage or something like that, you really feel it in the music, so.
Especially if it's guitar.
Especially the guitar, which is kind of filling a lot of the rhythmic space, And so, occasionally I break a string, so I like to have another guitar there so I can just sort of grab another guitar and minimize the impact on the music, because otherwise I got the guitar kind of goes out of tune a little bit if the string breaks, and so sometimes I can kind of finish off the tune, but a lot of times I have to just sort of stop and then change the string, and it kind of sucks.
Yeah.
So
something you can switch to is good.
Yeah. But I prefer, I always kind of have been this way where I prefer, even before I played acoustic guitar and bluegrass, when I played electric music, I always like having one guitar that I just can vibe on for the night, settle into.
Yeah.
And, that feels better to me than switching for this song and switching for that song and, that sort of thing, which some people do. And I get it too, because sometimes, if you're playing a type of music where, well, the Les Paul is going to be better on this one and a Telly is going to be good on this one. It's different sounds and it makes sense, but I've always kind of just liked to sort of get the differences in the hands, and try to find your, I feel like having more doesn't necessarily, to me in my brain, sometimes I lose sight, even with effects sometimes,
Sure.
Guitar effects. I used to play with just my Telly into my 1968 deluxe reverb amp, and any other variation. Maybe I would use a wah-wah sometimes, and any variations would be kind of in the pickup selection, or I was kind of messing around and getting different sounds, that way. And then as my pedal board grew, I found myself kind of, replacing all of that creative stuff with just stepping on pedals, and which I think is cool too, but I just realized that. So now I kind of have a setup where I could loop out of the pedal board completely. So I can still just play exactly straight through, kind of pretty much. And then, when I want to use some effecty things for specific things, and I find them then, when I'm looped out of the pedal board, I tend to kind of use my hands in the more of the organic kind of way of trying to find my variables,
I think to be in the creative field for any length of time, it seems like we all go through those phases of I'm going to be just straight up completely purist, and then you're well, maybe I'll allow myself to have one pedal to do this one thing on this one song, and then you're actually maybe these aren't so bad, and then you build up a whole pedal board, and you're then you become pedal guy, and then you have to come back around and go minimal. But you go through those ups and down phases, right? Of just whatever's getting you interested. Yesterday I popped out the you all know the Porta Studio, Tascam Porta.
Yeah.
So I've had one of those for a few years, but the power supply broke. Anyway, I found out they're getting cool again, and they're becoming the price is shot way up on reverb. So I was I need to bust mine out. So I soldered it back together yesterday, got it going, and all of a sudden I'm doing all sorts of weird, cool tape cassette effects to this new song I'm working on. And I'm oh yeah, tape cassettes are well, I got into tape cassettes because I couldn't afford, back in the day, a tape machine.
Right.
So I was well, tape cassette will give me some of that feel, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Did some cool shit with it. And then when I got a real tape machine, I was no, this is the thing. Now I'm well, let me come back to the tape cassette. You just go through whatever's
you go through phases.
Getting you excited today.
And kids like their toys.
That's right.
And we're just basically kids as musicians at the end of the day. I think, we're just playing a little game here with music. And if you're open to it, cool. If you're not, that's cool too. I, grew up very traditional bluegrass as a purist for sure. So adding all that technology was fun for me. It was like new toy central. And yeah, I had this AR-15 case that was included my pedal board inside of it. And it was this massive thing with all these pedals I was dragging all over the place.
That's right.
And now it's become basically, I have one little Pelican case and I don't even use half the pedals on it now.
Yeah.
So, and there's especially with violin, of course, it's a different animal. There's sounds that make it sound cool, and also sounds that make it sound novelty. And I try to not to use the novelty ones. Sometimes we'll do a jam where it gets tripped out, or we're at some stony festival or something at the end of the night, late night, and everybody's a zombie, maybe. But that's such a rare thing. And even now, like, I mean, I've been playing since I was 3 years old, so you learn how to adapt your sound to the sound that you have available to you. And electricity on its own can be used to change the entire way that you play the fiddle, for sure, as opposed to playing here acoustic, just sitting there.
It's always different. Yeah, I'm plugged in. It's like a different approach.
Add
almost,
just the electricity alone, the response it becomes a whole different animal. And you can do like natural effects without having pedals and that kind of stuff. And so that's kind of a interesting thing. Like you say, it does come around, and I've gotten to the point, I don't think it's laziness. I feel like it's really just like, man, I'm kind of over the novelty of the toys, and I've come back now to this place where I'm like, it's better if I just do this shit myself.
Yeah.
Make those sounds somehow.
And then when you do use it, it's more deliberate. I think that's the thing is you get the stuff, you want to take like, if you're like a carpenter, right?
Yeah.
You don't use every single tool you have on every single job, right?
Right.
Like you're trying to kind of like get the job done, and you're going to use the necessary tool, but only when you need it, right? And I think like, sometimes as musicians, like we like our toys, you get a new effect, you're kind of like trying it on this and trying on that, and then you kind of settle out of that and you go, okay, well, I know what that's going to do, and and then you
buy a hammer, and then you're like, fuck, I could probably hammer a screw.
Yeah, that's right. I could probably make
it works.
Right. It's kind of okay. Well,
Shit,
maybe
I can't go back over to the other side of the house to get that other tool. I'm going to use this one.
Right. Yeah. Because and now I don't have to do this with the screwdriver. I could just hit it.
Yeah.
So this will be easier, And then you're like, well, actually, it's way easier if I just use a screwdriver with that, But
when you get a new toy,
you want to use it
for a while.
It's fun.
And you talk about like tape, going back to tape. I mean, when I started, when I was young, we were playing and we had like our little studios. We started with cassette 4 tracks, of course. And then we eventually got like an 8-track 1/4-inch reel machine,
like Fostex
R8, and in those days. It was still like when you like went on Musicians before. I think it was before Musician's Friend was part of Guitar Center. It was like they were their own like mail order, and like you can go in the catalog, and like the recording package in those days was still like an R8 machine with like some shitty Fostex console with like plastic things on it.
Yeah, my buddy has
one.
Yeah,
and but like we recorded all our shit with that, and that stuff sounds fucking amazing. We had like
any of y'all's records.
It was like stuff I was doing back then. It was like blues and that kind of thing. And I would do demos where I had like maybe like an SM57 and maybe like one other kind of mic, and I would just be doing a demo and just throw on top of a drum kit, and I'd play the drums, and the bass I would probably just play straight into the tape, and then I'd have my like old amps and stuff, and I'd just mic it up and record it, and then I had like a Hammond organ, record the B3, bouncing, or if you needed to. But I had 8 tracks, so it was like pretty good. And like I've gone back to those tapes, and because I still have an R8 machine, and it's like, damn man, shit, we didn't have, and back in those days, and it wasn't like these now like with Pro Tools, like where you could put a compressor on every single, channel. Back then we had like 2 channels of compression. That's all we had. We had 2 channels of EQ. That's all we had. So you had to like, when you were mixing and stuff, you had to, but then eventually went to ADATs, then eventually to Pro Tools. And then all these years later, it was like I wanted to get back into tape, recording on tape. And I got like an Ampeg, I got which machine was it? But it was like, an 8-track on half-inch tape machine that we were recording in Denver. And they had this machine. I was like, oh, that's a cool tape machine. They're like, oh, it's going in the fucking dumpster. You want it? And I was like, we have like 3 of them, and this one, we just don't need it. I was like, yeah. I like shipped it home. It cost like $80 to ship it home. This weighed a ton. There happens to be a great, repair guy that works on it. It needed some work. He did some work on it. I'm like, sick. Got like a half-inch tape machine. I started recording with it and doing some demos. And what I realized is, I think the thing about it is like when you go now on Pro Tools, you're recording something. Okay, I'm gonna put on the bass part. I just like set it all up, get a tone, and I was like hit record, start like playing because okay, I could figure whatever. You're going to go back, punch in. Well, you realize when you start working with tape again, it's like, well, you can't do that. Reminded me how like when you did a punch in, you had to like think about like, okay, I'm going to punch in that there's this little bit of this solo I don't like, I'm going to punch, I want to punch that in, but I like the rest of the solo. I really like, God, exactly, and you kind of go sometimes, well, if I punch in though and I fuck up the punch, I might lose this whole thing, So you know what, I'm going to, I don't love that little thing, but I'm going to leave it.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then now you have like music that's left with some blemishes. If you listen to any of the great records in time, there's this humanness that's in slight little blemishes. I'm not saying, leaving clams all over the place, but you know what I mean?
Right.
Little bits that now we tend to like micro punch and, oh, there's a little squeak there. Let's get that little time, okay, I'm just going to micro punch. And then like you zoom it all in and you get that, well, okay, great. You fucking cleaned it up. But like, when you think about like the old music, I think there's a reason why those records are so timeless and people listen to that, because I think and you can feel it. You could put on headphones in a Beatles record, for example. You'll hear fucked up edits. You'll hear little stray sounds like all over the place, little mistakes, But like, I think that like our brains are attracted to that because it's like, it's human. It's like, it's not so airbrushed,
Yeah.
And I think so I try to carry that over, even though like working with tape isn't really like, from a workflow point of view, I can't really like, the way that it's just easier in a lot of ways to work in Pro Tools and to kind of use the software to record and you have the, all this stuff. But I think what I try to do is like now I try to kind of think of it like when I'm doing a punch in or something. I try to think of it like, well, if this were tape, would I punch this in? I try to be conscious of that, and I try to leave little human elements into stuff sometimes and not be so micro punchy. You know?
I did a record with a band called Dawson Hollow, which I want to talk to you guys about because I ended up. This is a tangent. As a tangent, I almost saw your band one time. This band Dawson Hollow, they were the band before you at the Shipyard Festival, and I've done all their records. So I happened to be in town, so I went and mixed their show. So I mixed front of house, and they're like, yeah, the Infamous Stringdusters are playing after this. They love you guys. I had never heard of it, and I was like, I have a 6-hour drive back to Nashville. Hope it's a great show. So,
yeah.
So I missed you. But I think you were on the other stage across so I saw you setting up.
I know how that works.
So anyway, they all came out of Bluegrass. They were a kids, like, family band, Bluegrass band for 20 years. And then when I met them, they were like all finally kind of coming of age, and they were like, we want to kind of start our own band and like do indie music because we've just been playing standards and like that whole circuit of family bands. It's like they're playing churches and private venues and hey, come do a 50s night for the old folks, you know what I mean, and a Christmas concert or stuff. Right. And so they wanted to do an indie band, and they met me, and I'm from California and grew up with rock music, so I was like, hell yeah. So I kind of took these, and the first record, I would say it's more like a folk record than it is like a bluegrass record, but they still were kind of playing all their bluegrass instruments. 8 years down the line now, they're kind of like an indie rock band, I would say, except they always have a fiddle player, and they play they'll play mandolin and stuff, and they'll still kind of pull from the bluegrass stuff. So their last record, we decided, it was right when I bought the tape machine, and I was like, sold them on Let's Do a Tape Machine record. And it was my first tape machine record and their first tape machine record. So we had this whole learning process. And like, so to your point, the first song we did it with was called Bayou Flowers. And as we were going in, he had a guitar. There's a section, kind of like a middle eight, where it's just guitar solo and then comes back to the chorus. And with them, we had always done like lead guitar gets overdubbed later. Like you're going to go through the song and you're going to play the rhythm part. And later on, we'll come back, do the lead, whatever. So like we pushed into the old school vibe. I was like, I want you to play the solo in the room. And Ben's the lead singer and guitar player. It was a bit of a fight because he was like, he knows he's really, really good, but he knows that he could get, like, if we're going to normally do a 4-hour lead guitar session where he gets to get completely intricate and into the weeds and do all the stuff. And he's like, I know I really want to be able to think through what would be great about this solo. And I was like, no, dude, we're doing it in the room. And so half the time he would chicken out and he would just play the chords. And I'd be like, no, Ben, play the solo. And so anyway, he ended
up...
It's
no going back, you know?
Yeah.
It's like full committal.
He got it, and it's sick, and it's different than what we would have done if we sat, because I'm not kidding, the previous records, we'd sit there for 3 hours for a guitar solo to try to make it the most perfect, amazing, transcendent thing you've ever heard. But there's a different energy when somebody just does it in the room, and it is what it is.
I think it forces you to play.
There's also, when you're a musician, especially in this town of Nashville, you gotta come to the table and do it. You got to perform, and so
time is money. You know,
time is money, and I remember learning that and practicing that a lot living in this particular town. You can spend hours in the studio, and I did and have, working on a solo or whatever, but man, if you can get it in a minute, you'll get hired. And so the pressure's on a little bit, which forced me to sort of focus on getting a little better to where I could get stuff more immediate and think of those creative solos more on the spot. And that translates to your live playing too. You can't just do it and expect it to happen. Like, you have to practice that. Yeah. And, you know, luckily for us, we have that avenue to play in the arena we have to play in every night to explore that.
Well, we're not playing in arenas generally, but
well, sometimes.
But sometimes, though, yeah.
but we explore the improv. But that's really helped me become a better player. You know, to be able to sort of go into the studio, and even though you're doing it, you know, on the spot, as you say, in the room, you're still like actually doing something that's creative and unique, and, you know, not having to necessarily. Now, it's no dock on, maybe I should spend 3 hours on my solos, but it just feels like from where I've come from, it's a lot more efficient, and now like it's paying off to have sort of approached it that way, you know. I don't know.
Yeah, and you know,
100%.
I think that, I mean, I can't tell you how many times we've been like in the studio and I'm like working on a solo. And maybe it's like, you know, working on a solo for like an hour, and it's like, okay, and come up with something, and it's like, all right, yeah, that's cool. And then, you know, I go home and I'm like, it's fucking, man, it's not working. And I either, oftentimes, like, I go back to like one of the first takes, and it's like, this one's just better. It's just like, you know, this one might be like actually like technically better, but this one is just better. It's just like fitting with everything better. Or I have to like redo it because I just spent all this time doing this thing, but it's like it just sounds sterile. Because I had like worked on it for so long, and it's so like, and I mean, I think people do that, and it's great. You know, I to each his own. I just
to each their own.
But you know, I do feel like that there is. Yeah, there's something to be said for just like leaving, you know, not just for me, it's like getting out of the micro punch mode and getting more into like I want to kind of have.
Doing a bigger section of music.
Yeah, and looking at it more from
that's what the tape buys you.
Right.
Is because, so that same tape record, we'd go and we'd cut a vocal, and the process had to change, because in the olden days it was like, I don't know, sing it down 11 times. Let me give you different feedback and advice and thoughts, and where could we push this? Right. And then we're going to kind of comp that together and figure out. With the tape machine, it's like, let's get it until it sounds good. Yeah. Let's get it till we're like, that was a good pass of that song. Yeah. And then we're going to go listen to it, and if there's any small punches, we'll write them down and we'll do those specific punches. Yeah, right. But it's like, you've got to have a good performance, because we can't, if we do it 10 times down, what if he lost his voice? What if his peak was at 6? You don't
Yeah,
know,
that's
and you
right.
just recorded over it.
That's right.
It's a more risky proposition. But hey, there's always another day too. You know,
There's always another day.
True.
You don't always have a perfect voice on every day, and you can't always go in the studio and demand your most excellent performance on your best instrument. You know, and that's hard to remember
That's
too.
interesting.
You know, sometimes I try to keep that in mind, you know, because you are in the studio and they're paying you, or you're looking down, breathing down your neck in a metaphoric kind of way because of that. Because money's hard to come by in the music industry sometimes. So it's important you get your job done and you practice and you make sure you nail your shit. But at the same time, who can on demand do their most creative shit in the moment? I mean, you get better at it, I think. And I learned a lot from following musicians in Nashville that did that, people that I admired, especially like Stuart Duncan is one that comes to mind. Like, I was always blown away. Like, he could play with, no offense, but like some of the most mediocre musicians that you would ever hear, in my opinion. But he would still sound like an absolute genius. And it was because he was just literally in that moment. He had done his homework. He had practiced his instrument, and he's a master at his craft. And so, you can definitely spend some time at it, and that kind of stuff. And like you say, it's, I think, best to leave some hair on it when you're, laying down, especially a big live long track. But it's also, I think, important to note that, you can't always perform your best thing every single day. And sometimes you just got to chalk that up and be like, man, I'll come back tomorrow. See you later.
Well, and it's interesting, too, to think about that. It's like, I think part of that, too, is, a lot of times if you're doing somebody else's record and you're on a session, it's like you are in that mindset. But for some reason, when you're doing like your own music, sometimes you're like, well, I have to make this the greatest thing I've ever done.
Right. Yeah.
And because this is my record, so I'm going to spend all this time, this is our record. We're going to spend all this time doing this. But like, maybe if you just kind of go in and, because, like you've done a million sessions, and my solos, for example, on recording sessions I've done have been no better or worse than the solos that I spent 2 hours doing, But it's like, it's like the mindset of like wanting to, have just make sure that everything you're doing is like absolutely, you don't have that choice when you're in a session,
Well, especially on that tape thing, like it is true. I've been in tons of recording sessions, and how many times, and probably y'all have too, how many times does the guy taking the solo in there, it starts out good, and then like you say, there's a 2 or 3, maybe 4 in, and you're starting to do very well, maybe in peaking, and then about 25 or 30 later, you're not getting anywhere. You're not gaining any momentum at all.
It's diminishing returns.
You've lost everything. Yeah. In fact, the guy is all pissed, and so is the engineer, and everybody else is hungry, and so
everyone's hungry.
It's just kind of one of those things. You got to capture it in the moment it can be captured. And it's not always easy. That's kind of what makes our job cool in that way.
Well, then there's something to be said, too. You talk about, like, analog recording. There's something to be said, too, about, like, the way when you're doing analog mixing, mixing from tape, like, through a console, like, and using, that's something that was interesting, too, in the old days, because you were doing, a mix was like a performance.
Right.
And everyone was like,
everyone,
every single mix, we would, like, whenever we mixed that stuff back then, every mix was slightly unique because we didn't have any automated, faders even, nothing was automated. So you had like tape on the console, and you'd mark like where the solo needs to come up, and then you'd have notes. You'd have your notes, and it'd be like, okay, at this time, the guitar's got to come up. On this time, bring down this, this vocal, like. You were doing all of this stuff, and you had these notes, and then you'd run, whatever you were mixing to, whether it was like a DAT tape, maybe it was what we did a lot of, or, before that, I guess we were just mixing onto cassette tapes, but, and you do your performance, and like sometimes you'd got to get through them, and then you do like another one and another one, but each one would be slightly, because, the way you're pushing the fader up, or maybe you didn't go exactly to that thing, or maybe, and yeah, there was a little bit of like a feel for each one, and then you'd kind of listen to your mixes, and that was part of your consideration, was like, which one of these mixes has the best? Oh, I like the way that the solo seems to come up just like a little bit less on this one. I think that's better, And
Yeah,
you know, but you don't see a lot of that anymore because
No, yeah.
you know, you got to have, you know, a rack full of everything there, or you have to have like an Epic console, you know,
Right.
you know, that has all of your compression and all of your EQs and, you know, everything as you want it. And, you know, I mean, who's got, you know, no big studios have that kind of thing, but I mean, you know, that's not really like realistic for like for a smaller studio to have all that stuff, you know, but.
Right. I definitely want to try it sometime. I'll tell you that.
It was fun.
How did you guys make your new record?
You know,
The record comes out this week, right? Is it Friday?
Yeah, it comes out Friday, tomorrow. And yeah, we did that like there's a studio called Mighty Fine in Denver that we record at most of the time. It's a great room. It has like enough isolation booths with sight lines and everything, and it's like a really cool spot. And you know, 3 of the guys in the band live in the area, so it just makes sense for us to work in there. And the guy who owns it, Colin's very cool, and so we've made several records in there. So we did that. I mean, it's, you know, and then we did an alternate session up at Aaron's place,
Swing Fingers
in
Fort Collins,
and that was he has like a lot of like, it's a smaller studio like in his house kind of thing. You know, a little bit, but a very nice sort of setup and much cozier. But like his thing is just like all of like vintage kind of gear, like, you know, a lot. But we did Pro Tools with him, you know, too. But it was, you know, and kind of the way we do most of our records. I mean, we do pre-production. We do, you know, starts with show and tell of songs, and we're kind of going through songs. We eventually
live tracking,
you know, and then we do live tracking. Do you
do that in like in y'all's space, like somebody's house or something?
No, in the studio we do live
okay.
tracking and try to get line of sight, so where we can all lay down the track live.
And then whoever's like singing the tune, because we have you know, several singers in the band, you know, lead singers, and so usually whoever's singing the tune will sing full out, you know, and then when we get a track that we like, you know, we get a take that we like. Then we'll be like, okay, this is the take, and then confessions start.
Confessions.
You know, then you have your confession time where you're like, well, I kind of missed a chord in the bridge, and I got to redo my solo, you know, and then, but usually we'll start with like say if I were singing a song, being the guitar player, you know, that vocal is gonna bleed on the track, so I have to kind of go back and I'll recut the guitar part just without any singing, and then usually what we do is maintain as much of the original part and just sort of fly in the new guitar wherever the singing was, you know, so that it just kind of like you're using mostly the original track that went down, just wherever the bleed was, you kind of replace with new guitar. And then,
this is part of pre-production, right?
No, this is all like when we're making the record.
Recording, yeah.
So then we're making, you know, and then we will do, you know, the usually, you know, whatever fixes that anyone has to do, and then, you know, vocals, and, you know, but there have been times too, like where, like we have a tune on a couple of records ago called Toward the Fray, where there's like a lot of parts where I'm singing it and playing guitar just by myself, where the band is sort of dropped out, and there was like, because we don't use a click or anything like that, and so, you know, you really had to, I had to do that vocal live. You know, with the guitar part, it had to be like the keeper take. So it's not perfect, but again, like what we were talking about before, I don't mind it so much because it's just kind of, you know, it's real, and so, you know, yeah, it might have been a few things I might have liked to have fixed, but I couldn't.
Well, I can't tell you how many times I've like tracked a vocal for somebody and they're like, "Oh, my voice messed up there," and I'm like, "No, I loved that part."
Yeah.
Because their voice broke up in a way that made sense with the lyric.
Style is style and real is real for sure, you know, and you want to keep that stuff. That is the good stuff. That's the stuff you can't really necessarily even reproduce if you wanted to sometimes. Right. And you want to try to keep that if it's not ridiculous, you know.
Yeah. How do you mic the fiddle when you're...
I've done it a variety of ways, pretty much all the classic ways. You know, a lot of people like to use like a large diaphragm type thing.
Yeah.
Or one of those Neumann, you know...
little pencil mics.
Yeah. Or I've actually used a ribbon mic. Sounds fantastic on fiddle, but they're of course a lot of pain to sort of deal with, and you got to have sort of a special studio that has one because you don't want to be like carrying those things around very much, I don't think. But a ribbon mic sounds fantastic on fiddle, and honestly, this fiddle that I have is probably the illest fiddle in the country. So it's like it doesn't matter what you put on it. I can play through a 57; it still sounds good in my opinion. Just the tone of the fiddle itself. It's 100 years old. It's got hollow bracings in it, and just I've been playing it my whole life. So I feel like that's a lot of it too, especially as a bluegrass musician or acoustic musician is. I know people get really serious about, the science behind recording and that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, man, if you have good hands and you can play the instrument well and you get what you need out of it, it matters less as to what you try to pick it up with,
Yeah.
In my home studio, in fact, I use one of these. This is a Shure SM7B.
Yeah.
I use this on my fiddle and vocals to do because it's a well-rounded mic. It's not a huge price point and that kind of stuff. And so any overdubs and that kind of stuff that I've done, I've sent those out, and I always get compliments on that. And I feel like a lot of it has to do with me as a player with, being able to pull the tone that I need out of my instrument.
Right.
And then just
having the
capture
ear
it.
for what
Sure.
it is you're wanting to hear.
Yeah, what you need to get out of the mic for sure.
Yeah. And the fiddle's also it's a real bright instrument.
Yeah.
So a mic the cool thing about the SM7B is that it has good low end and it sounds nice and clear.
Right.
But it is still softening compared to like a large diaphragm condenser microphone. So
sometimes I use those and they sound terrible on the fiddle. They'll be like, "Oh, I use this microphone on Madonna's voice," and I'm just like, "Oh, that's of course you want to use it, but you get in there and it's not as good as sometimes as a more pointed thing like that big hollow sound. Sometimes I feel like that's a mistake on the fiddle because you're going for reverb, but you're losing the tightness of the instrument, and it's better to manufacture.
These could take like high SPL too, which is like so you can like really play into it, and so you can sometimes you have those large diaphragms can be a little bit more delicate. If you kind of hit the capsule too hard, it can
right,
yeah,
a little
distorts.
crunchy.
Yeah.
But
so when you guys so on this new record, do you bring in a producer or do you just all produce it as a band and just kind of work with an engineer?
yeah, that's we just usually like work with an engineer. We have done like co-production things with a lot of times it's this guy Billy Hume that's out of Atlanta he was kind of more known for making in the rap world, and we connected with him, and he would be kind of like a co-producer and engineer, and he was like a really outside the box kind of guy, and really great. I was able to, and really what was great about him is the way he mixes things too. Is like he knows how to kind of like really capture, because it's different in the studio than it is like a live thing, but he kind of somehow is able to capture the energy of like what we do live,
Well, he did this whole record with us, actually.
He
mixed it.
He mixed it because we couldn't, he would have been in the studio, but we couldn't make that work this time around. But he did do the mixing on it, so we have Billy's sound on it.
Yeah, I feel like it's an interesting thing for using a producer because we've definitely used him in the past, especially starting out, and some of that was to align ourselves with a good name of somebody in the industry, and take their advice and that kind of thing, but. At the same time, personally, I kind of almost like would rather not be using a producer because we have 5 great musicians that are at the top of their game. And like I've been playing fiddle since I was 3 years old, and there's better fiddle players than me, but there's no one going to be able to tell me how to do what I do better than what I do. Sure. And I know that's not always what producing is about, but when it comes to bluegrass, I'd put us up against knowledge against anyone in the industry, as much collective years as we've had in the industry as a whole. So I feel like no one knows how to make our music better than us, and maybe a creative palette could come in and do some things. But it inevitably, when we've had that situation, there's always some wrong rubbing that happens. With 5 different guys and trying to work the way that everyone works. We know better because we're used to working with each other, especially after 20 years, and so. I'll be honest, like the times that we've used the producers, of course, in the early days, Tim O'Brien and Tim Stafford were great. They're awesome heroes of ours, Bluegrass guys. But other times we've used producers, it's not been my favorite results that we've come up with. And
well, just that we have, 5 people in the band that produce records for other people sometimes even. So you essentially have 5 producers, and so
too many cooks in the kitchen.
Yeah, like when you bring in a producer, it's like you're almost like sometimes just jumbling it up more because you're sort of gumming it up more because you're just throwing like yet another opinion in a place where there's already like a lot of opinions, and so sometimes it's like
not fun for me. I don't like it.
And it's not that there's anything wrong with like with what that person is doing or anything. It's just the way that we operate. It just It's hard because we've.
Well, it sounds like you guys have your shit figured out. Like you've been around for 20 years now.
Yeah,
so
like there's certain things that, and we all kind of you sort of fall into like, you eventually learn like where each individual's strengths are, and that person tends to sort of stand out more naturally in these areas, and we all sort of, you know what I mean? It's kind of like, you in a band like that, there's like certain things that all kind of like. Back off more of, because, I know like this is like his expertise.
And you can trust him.
Yeah, and you have full trust. It's like great. And then there are other times where I might kind of, assert myself a little bit more because I feel like that's sort of more something I might, and we all kind of know each other's spot in that. So it seems to like work really good. And then when you throw just like sort of like another piston into that engine, it kind of maybe throws off the balance a little bit. And so
some people like it and some people don't, and that messes up the energy.
Yeah, and I think that would still be interesting though to work with, like, I think if you found like a specific producer that everybody in the
Billy.
band,
we've enjoyed working with Billy.
Yeah, well, but Billy and his production,
it's hands off some of the more musical things, and it's more sonic. But he does have ideas.
Yeah, he does. He'll throw ideas out, like as you're making the record, and say, "Well, how about you
valuable?"
But we've already like arranged, and we've already kind of gone through those things, and then he's at that point when we're actually making the record, like having that extra, voice to sort of throw different like ideas out. But yeah, there's a very specific sort of, I think. Amount of that like works really well, and Billy Hume, he works very well with the band. He just really understands, I think, everybody and where we're at, and he knows when to assert himself in things, and
he knows the flow.
And he knows how the flow works.
But that's not to say that we would never do it. We're all open-minded folks for sure. It just it just hasn't been something that has been like, like I know a lot of bands use producers, and there's some big names out there, which honestly I feel like is part of what it's about. And to me, that's lame as hell. Just playing that part of the industry because you want a big name as a producer on your record. Fuck that. Just my opinion. And,
it's like if they had a creative...
I've seen it work, and it's awesome, and I don't mean to like disrespect anybody or anything like that, but I feel like some of it's kind of a game, especially because we've been in this shit forever. And I would put our band up against any bluegrass band. You know what I'm saying? So it just to me it just says that some of it is just kind of a game. And that's the part of the industry that I personally don't like.
Well, I think but I think it could be,
it can be cool and creative.
Yeah, I just think it's like, you just need, we would need, maybe one day if all 5 of us were like, we're like on board with that. And like, hey, this, because it was a specific person that we all sort of equally sort of admired and trusted to that point. But I mean, we would be open to it. But I just think it's hard to find that, because I think at the end of the day, by the time we get to that point, we kind of, just being artists, it's like I guess other opinions are good and everything, but I think ultimately we're just trying to express ourselves as artists, and I think like we're very hands-on with our music, and we're that's part of, you know, like we talked about earlier, you know, like the journey, right? Instead of someone saying, you know what you should do, bop, 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 bop. Let me hear you do this. I know this sounds weird, but I think this is going to be a cool idea. And I think that's like really creative and really cool. But I think in our band, we're kind of doing that. So it's sort of, you know, it's almost kind of like, you know, getting in the way of obstructing our sort of artistic sort of output. You know what I mean?
It's interesting to me. Like if you were a painter, like you would never have like another painter come in and like tell you how to paint your picture. It's a foreign thing. To me, that's how I sort of take it. Right. It's almost offensive to me. Although, like you say, there's certain ways that it can work. Yeah. But it just has to be a very special situation, I think, especially working with certain types of artists like myself. It would just have to be special, you know, and I'm definitely not opposed to it. And I know you can get some good results for sure. And when I produce records for people, as you said, you know, and so it's one of those things where I know I've helped a band be better than they are. And I'm not, so that's not trying to say, like, I'm not trying to be conceited, like I'm the best at what I do and I can't be any better. It's just where I'm at in my career, I guess, and how I perceive my art and how I want to make it.
Well, it's also like how you make your art. I mean, and I think that's a big thing. It's like, you know, when you take like, you know, maybe arguably one of the greatest producers of all time, you take like George Martin, right, and Beatles, right? That relationship of producer and artist, right?
Did you notice that on my arm?
No. Yeah, sick. Yeah, I you know, yeah, it's like they were songwriters, they were a band, they were like young guys, but it's like, you know, in that case, it was like, you know, making music in the studio was like a different thing, you know, and they were creating it kind of maybe as a. But
they didn't have a lot of experience,
and they were kind of writing the rules. I mean, they were writing the books on it, but like there was this thing of like making records, and there was like, you're bringing this band now. How can we make this record? How can we do that? And you know, how can we do that and this and you know, and you have this producer who's going, well, you know, I could play the keyboard part on this, and you know, great, and they're like making this thing. But we're like a band that like, you know, our sound, we're not. Sometimes we do like overdubs of some things. I've done some like piano overdubs, for example, or maybe some percussion overdubs, or obviously sometimes we're doubling up a fiddle part or whatever, you know. But like we're not like, there's like a sort of I guess being a bluegrass band, you know, I think that's kind of part of like what maintains what we're doing is like having this sort of base level of it being a string band ultimately, you know what I mean? And there's a sound there. We're not like, it's not like you go through our records and this song, you know, has like a pop, you know, electronica thing going on, and the next song, you know, is going to be just like an acoustic guitar and a vocal, and you know, we're not like varying things like this and looking for different ways. It's like we're getting that in like, you know, the different types of grooves that we're making. It's like more of an you know, coming from like the pocket that we're making, like, because you know, we're like a drum kit as a band, you know, basically without having drums, you know, so we have like certain grooves that are going to be like what we would consider like, you know, there's like the bluegrass, you know, normal bluegrass grooves, but then there's like these like alt grooves or that are like, that we'll call like, you know, it's like an alt groove. It's like more of like a rock groove or like a downbeat kind of groove, you know, might be, you know, something that's like, you know, whereas like the grass stuff might be like going, you know, like, oh, wait, like, you know, this bluegrass groove, right? But then like a lot of our stuff might be like, you know, it's like more of like a rock kind of feeling thing, you know? And that's kind of like how we're varying stuff. So like, yeah, so, you know, bringing that back to like why sometimes producers don't work with us, because like we sort of, it's like already inherent in the tune how things are going to go, right? There's not really much, and that's how we're varying things. We're not looking for someone to necessarily come up with like creative ideas to find new soundscapes. Like the soundscape is like through these 5 instruments, you know, and the 5 voices, you know?
Yeah. Well, now that we've broken the cherry of music being played in the room, one question I wanted to ask is like, how do you two play together to create? It's like when you said like the whole band is a drum kit in a way. Like I know what you mean, but also I'm not a bluegrass musician, so I don't. How do you two interact? Like, is one person kind of more the snare and one person's more the kick?
Exactly. So like basically the way and this is,
I just want an excuse to get you to play.
This is like 101, sort of bluegrass stuff. But like, this just like the basic way it is like the bass is almost like the kick drum playing like a, right? So it's almost like 4 on the floor kick drum kind of, right? The mandolin would be kind of playing like a, so bass playing boom, 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 So that's like your snare, right? And that's what we call the chop. So in our band, we don't have a mandolin, so what does the chop would be like the fiddle. So, and then the guitar is almost, well, the banjo, I think of the banjo almost is like rolling through. It's almost like a hi-hat kind of.
Okay.
Kind of keeping like a hi-hat thing. It's like just kind of this, rolling kind of thing. And the guitar then is sort of filling it all out. Maybe just, kind of gluing all these parts together. So typically, if I'll play the bass notes. So there's like the groove, He's playing the chop, the snare. So it's either the dobro or the fiddle playing that chop.
Yeah.
And that's sort of the breakdown of a basic bluegrass groove.
So what is it you guys brought in to bluegrass? Like, how have you guys changed it? Because I know, like, you're considered more progressive bluegrass. I don't know do you identify with the term newgrass, or is that different?
It's all, I think we would probably be considered like progressive bluegrass, probably because newgrass would be more associated maybe with like Bela and Sam and those guys, like Newgrass Revival kind of thing. I think in like modern bluegrass, like progressive bluegrass, which I think is, I don't know, jamgrass is something that people might sort of label us as. I'm not sure. We're unique because we're kind of in the jamgrass world. We're also kind of in the progressive bluegrass world, and but we came from also the early part of the band. It was like, they considered it progressive bluegrass, I guess, but it was pretty trad
just
sounding,
kind of, Yeah, we definitely have all of our roots that are in common in the trad bluegrass world. So there's a swing to bluegrass that if you play bluegrass, everyone knows about. It's a thing. It's a vibe that happens, and it's like casting a perfect fly cast on a reel or something, into the river. Like once you hit it right, it feels good. And there's a reason why bluegrass has stood the test of time. And we share that commonality, and bluegrass has high standards and integrity in the chops, which I've always loved and appreciated about the music. And so that's a cool thing that we sort of have gone from. But we all also have other training in various styles, in jazz and blues and even rock and different things within the band. So, with our generation, you couldn't help but like draw on all of those experiences, not just the bluegrass, even though that's our common foundation. So I feel like that also helped round our sound out to something more. And I feel like in a lot of ways, we've transcended bluegrass itself into just, we definitely do bluegrass and we pay homage to it a lot and we use bluegrass a lot. But at the same time, like, I feel like some of our songs are definitely just like songs, I don't know how else to describe. They're not really bluegrass. They're not like country, or they're like a string band music that's all on its own. I feel like, and it's
we have like our own like sort of subcategories of like the types of vibes of our music. Like we have like stuff that we might be like, oh, that's like kind of like a trad bluegrass kind of. That's kind of like a bluegrassy thing. Okay, then we have like what we call like art grass, which is stuff that's like more like artsy kind of. It's bluegrassy, but usually like a little bit more. I don't know, how would you describe? Like when we say art grass, it's like
show me an art grass.
It's not about trains and biscuits.
It's like well, maybe like
hearts and
what would be like art grass on the new
Would you
album.
mind pressing that button?
This one?
Yeah. Thank you.
Art grass, we'll give you a little bit of this one. This is like one of Jeremy's song. Called Burning Me Again. I would say that's like art grass, and that's on the new record. So that one, like,
I was born out of a fire that raged between two troubled souls. I grew up in the ashes, dug my way out of the hole. Once I dropped the shovel, yeah, I was on my way with a fever in my heart and a bitter price to pay. But I'm nothing but a dreamer, running with the wind, trying to keep that same old fire from burning me again.
That's kind of like
It's a great song.
like a art grass kind of vibe, you know, as opposed to just like hard driving bluegrass. You know, it's bluegrassy, but it's got, you know, something else to it. That's you know. So
what is this something else? Because in a lot of ways, like we could go throw that down on the MCI, and it would be like a 70s folk era song, like a Laurel Canyon kind of a song.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, the way you intonate your voice has more of the bluegrass. I can't think of the word right now. There's a certain, there's a bluegrassy way of singing.
I mean, I love Ralph Stanley, and the Stanley Brothers were my favorite of all the bluegrass guys. So definitely have put my time into studying the real music.
Yeah.
But you could slap a steel guitar on there, and you could easily have some more, 70s type vibe on there. And I mean, that's kind of like the hope, I guess, is when you write a song, it can kind of cross around into different things. But
a good song should be able to move around genres.
And bluegrass is, very versatile in that regard. Like, I don't think it, even still with as much popularity and fame as it's had through all the different avenues, it still doesn't get the credit it deserves as far as like how badass it is and versatile it is. And I feel like a lot of people go back to bluegrass and they don't even know they're going to bluegrass. They're singing intervals that they think feel good, and it turns out, man, that's what they've been doing in bluegrass like that forever, and there's a reason for that kind of haunting sound, especially in country, and it's easy to lose sight of that because bluegrass has had that sort of hillbilly, I guess stigma about it, and people have tried to do things to change that, and I don't know if we have, but one thing I like to hear sometimes that helps me feel like we're doing the right thing is when a guy comes up and tells us, man, my wife hates bluegrass, but she really loves you guys. That's a good compliment because that to me tells me I know what they mean. I know that they can't handle the rawness of bluegrass, but what we're doing with it makes it smooth enough that people can kind of get it from, different angles and they can get around that rough edge of what is cool. I love the rough edges of bluegrass, but we kind of do it a little bit smoother, and that kind of helps some people get more into it, I think.
Yeah. I was thinking about this, just thinking about this interview. I don't know if this will make any sense to you, but in my mind, and it's probably because I'm not a bluegrass musician, bluegrass and New Orleans jazz live in a similar world to me. And it's music that, it's very American, it's very Americana. And it's music that when you hear it, it just puts you into a good vibe. Like it puts you into a good feeling. Like if y'all have ever gone to Disneyland and like New Orleans Square and they just got the, and you're just walking around, you're just like, or like down in New Orleans.
It's a proven fact. When we're doing a show, when we do a straight up trad bluegrass song, you cannot deny the reaction from the crowd. It's even with your big hits or whatever. When you do a straight up like Stanley Brothers, Darling Say Won't You Be Mine or something like that, the whole crowd is smiling and dancing and having a good time because that's what bluegrass brings, joy for sure.
Yes, and even exactly, and you can, and that's. We have these different ways of thinking of these things, and bluegrass is like one of the things that we do, even though people consider us a blues. So sometimes, and that line is different for everybody, that like what's bluegrass to people and what's not, because sometimes I might say to like friends, we might do like, sometimes we go, we should do like a bluegrass show sometime, and people be like,
isn't that
aren't you a fucking bluegrass man?
Didn't you win a Grammy for bluegrass?
Well, what I mean is, yes, but like we always play we're always a bluegrass band, but meaning like we should like do a show that has like our originals that fall more like sound more like old bluegrass or more trad sounding stuff and trad stuff and and also like the maybe the presentation of it. I mean, when our live shows, it's presented like a rock show. I mean, we have a lighting engineer, and you know, the lights are going ape shit at times, and you know, it's like a rock show. You know,
even smoke.
You know,
Ooh.
yeah, right. You know, and you know, people are standing and dancing, but we can also do shows, which we do and we enjoy, is like in like a performing arts center where people are sitting, and you know, and it's like we kind of approach those shows a little bit differently, even
Sure.
you know, because you're feeling like a different thing. It's like, you know, and we're a little bit of a chameleon kind of band where we can kind of navigate between those two. And that's kind of recent for us because, you know, we started in that sort of seated sort of PAC bluegrass clap after solos kind of world, you know, and which is kind of a lot like a jazz world kind of, you know, in a lot of ways, but. And then kind of, you know, realized that like we liked playing for standing rooms and that kind of, you know, club kind of thing. And we had like a reset where we started literally switched and, you know, had to sort of, you know, we were selling out like the Birchmere and for, you know, whatever it was in DC, which was like a seated place. And then like to reset DC, we like started playing this place called Iota, which was like this little tiny, like 100-person, tiny like rock bar, like room, you know. Sell that out, and then we went back to 2 nights there, and then we started playing like 930 Club, you know, and then we're like, so we had like reset. We had to
DC?
kind of, yeah,
so that's like a rock club.
Yeah, so we had to like, but we had like reset it by going to like the small rock club, and you know, and it was a little bit of an investment too because we weren't going to we were making good money at these other things, but we had to kind of because it's a different audience, you know, the people want different things,
right.
you know,
you couldn't do the thing you wanted to do.
Yeah, and so we made that transformation, but now it's like. You know, and it used to feel weird when we were doing like standing rock rooms, and every now and again you'd be playing like more of like a seated sort of thing, and it would feel weird, and we would feel weird, and we would feel like, I don't know, the show isn't really designed for this really. And I guess lately we've kind of like embraced like getting back into doing some of that too, because there is a lot of, you know, you're able to really dive into the sound of the music and really kind of it's just a different thing than like a sort of rowdy rock show, you know, kind of, you know, and so we sort of enjoy bouncing back and forth between these different types of venues, you know. But yeah, we're lucky because you know, and that's what keeps us going. You know, you have like your musical DNA as individual musicians and as a band ultimately, you know. And so like when we were starting out and we were all like Jeremy said, you know, the common denominator was bluegrass. We had a lot of different influences in there, but we were trying to sound like bluegrass, you know, and kind of like, oh, I can't play like my rock influence stuff in this because it doesn't fit, you know. But as you kind of get going for years and you get more comfortable as a group and you start to get more comfortable letting more of these influences come out, and that's ultimately like how a band, I think, finds their unique sound by tapping into their individual unique musical DNA to a lot. Like, you know, Andy Hall's like, he loves bluegrass. He also loves like metal. I mean, he was a metal guitar player before he played dobro, you know. You know, Jeremy grew up playing, you know, like bluegrass music with his dad, but also like really well versed in like the like shape singing and all this stuff, and like, you know, brings all this other
shape singing,
you know,
shape notes, gospel music. Have you checked that out at all?
No,
it's a super old time way of singing that's kind of been lost by the wayside a lot of the places, but there's a lot of, you know, I grew up in like kind of a church type deal where you weren't allowed to play music. You could only sing, you know, a cappella. And there's an older style called sacred harp singing, I think, which is less notes in the scale, basically. But it's super awesome. If you can check it out on the internet, just Google it around sacred harp singing. You'll see some cool stuff. It'll kind of blow your mind. It's really crazy singing where they all get in a circle and sing at each other, basically, is at the top of their lungs. But it's super old-timey, very traditional. Well, the one I went to was a little step maybe more progressive in the sense that they used all 8 notes in the scale, and they had a shape for every note. And
Interesting.
that was so that you could use relative pitch instead of pitching a song with an instrument or whatever. You could use a way to pitch the song.
So you're like looking at this and you're like, sing a square, sing a triangle.
It's
sing a
always the
circle.
same note every time. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Each shape has that. And you
Interesting.
just, it's relative that way. So anyone can lead the song and anyone can sing along because you don't need an accompaniment, no instruments or anything like that. So it was a cool way. I really appreciated learning how to sing like that because I learned all 4 parts of harmony and how it all worked. And I became a pretty natural harmony singer. It's
Sure.
pretty natural for me. And,
I think you'd have like a real interesting like perspective of harmony if you're looking and you're like, oh, dude, do a triangle over the square.
Yeah.
Like triangle and square, like I don't know if they're that simple of shapes, but you're like, those sound great together. Like you can start to visualize harmonies in a way that people normally wouldn't.
You can. It also, I feel like a lot of it is you just get the frequency in your brain and it locks in, and for me, singing tenor was always very natural because it was like a part that was missing in the quartet within the congregation, a lot of times, at least as far as somebody who could sing strong. And my dad was a bass singer, so a lot of times growing up, I would sing the bass lines, 10 octaves higher than he was. And that's how I kind of learned the parts. And I would sit next to my grandma, and she would sing alto, and I would, sing her part with her. And and then bluegrass, my dad was way into, Flatt and Scruggs and Bill Monroe and the Stanley Brothers and that kind of stuff. So that was pretty easy to lock right in there with the gospel training and stuff. So I really am thankful for that upbringing. I feel like that's definitely my strong suit. When I'm producing a record, I can hear harmonies galore and I can help people point in the right direction. That's a hard point for a lot of people. I've found out over the years that for me, it's natural because I've done it so much, but a lot of other people, it's not natural to sing harmony or try to know where a part is always.
Really, you can focus, G-Grass can really focus into the details of a harmony and really, there might be like one little thing and be like, you're not quite, and then like you kind of, you make that tweak and you're like, oh yeah, and then all of a sudden everything's sort of like locking in, and exactly right. And,
it's my specialty. But I don't necessarily know what I'm doing. I'm not like, theoretical. Like I don't tell you the notes and the chords. I can just sing it for you. I can sing your part for you though. I know where it is and I can find it, and I'm definitely an ear player and an ear singer. I mean, I know, I can do some sight reading, of course. I've learned, throughout my career, but I definitely rely on my ears most of all.
Well, it's great when you bring all those different kind of influences together. I know there are still two other band members you like to go through, but I know like I'll work with some people and I'm totally ear. Like I know some theory, but I'm not fast enough with theory to be able to sit here and like map out the harmony for you. It's just a lot easier to just be like, and like sing it.
Yeah.
But I'll work with some artists who are a lot more. My best pairing is always people who are like real good at their theory and their instrument, because I'm like, I don't know how to tell you what to do, but I can use my ear. And so I'll work with some people on harmonies, and it's like I'll think of things that they're like, yeah, but that's not right technically. Or, but that's not the chord. But as an ear person, you kind of have access to some stuff that people who are too in the theory box, they're like, that's not what you're supposed to do. And I'm like, but hear how it sounds good though. Like
that's what's important at the end of the day. I mean, but it's like, everybody kind of, every band has their musical DNA and their influences. And when that stuff comes out, I think that's when we really started to make what was like, fundamentally the Infamous Stringdusters sound. It was like allowing these other all these influences in rock and
gospel,
from gospel and bluegrass and blues. All with the common denominator of bluegrass, but blues. And I grew up playing a lot of like Grateful Dead and listening to the Beatles. And,
we're not a preservation society.
No,
and I think a lot of bluegrass music and, like you say, especially the jazz is more. They're just trying to keep it alive, and there's not as much, innovation happening within the music.
Right.
Bluegrass is a lot more innovative, in my opinion, at least from my experience and what I know about the music. I could be totally wrong about that. But it just seems like, and bluegrass definitely has its preservation society. There's things where people try to dress the dress. They have the ties that Flatt and Scruggs have. They do the suits, they do the music exactly like they used to do it.
And
like,
it's awesome.
And it is awesome. I do respect it, and there's a place for that. But there's also, as an artist of our own, we do love to harken back to that stuff. But at the end of the day, we're our own artists. Even though Bill Monroe invented bluegrass music, we invented our music, and we took what he, showed us as far as chops, and we respect the hell out of that. But at the same time, and this is something that we learned when one of our bandmates actually went away from the band, and we were missing a piece of our band that normally would play a role in traditional bluegrass music. When that went away, we realized pretty quickly that we had the freedom to do a lot more than the roles that we were supposed to do on our instrument. We were able to think outside of those confines that were traditionally, a banjo always does this, a fiddle always does that, a mandolin always does this. We found out through that process that we can actually do whatever the hell we want. And through that was very freeing, and we didn't have to, care about what anybody thinks or anything like that. Of course, the pressure was off because we were a band together for a little while. I think the newer you are, the more pressure there is for that kind of crap. Yeah. But bluegrass in particular, it's a very finicky group of people that are very serious about what they feel like is bluegrass and is not. And sometimes that's a hurdle to overcome. But once you can stop caring about that, you can really make some of your best shit. And if you let bluegrass be the guide, it's damn strong, if you ask me.
Well, like, for example, I'm from New York. I'm from Long Island. I
home of the iced tea.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's just, I mean, I didn't grow up playing bluegrass music. I grew up playing these other things. I mean, if I'm being genuine and true to what I'm doing, right, I'm going to sound that stuff's going to come out, right? And I think that's like the key is like finding what our sound is collectively and being genuine to what we're doing and not worrying about whether it fits, what mold it fits in, what proverbial which rack in the record store, the proverbial record store, because there are hardly any record stores around anymore. Yeah. It's going to fit in, and more just kind of making our own, music. And that's all you can do. I think that's the best thing you can do as artists anyway, is always do what's most genuine and most authentic to yourself, and hope that some people connect with it.
Yeah.
Because if you're trying to chase it, it's never going to be, because it's never going to be authentic. And we all as humans can sniff out the stuff that's not authentic. It's your only hope at success is being authentic to yourself and making music that is, what we want to be doing, and not just sort of trying to emulate something else.
Well, I feel like it's definitely served us the best, myself, to do that, and it's been satisfying that I haven't really had to play, some kind of music that I didn't enjoy.
Yeah, and for some people, playing trad grass and doing that is their authentic
joy,
self.
And it used to be mine too.
Right.
I had my phase of that.
Right.
I think we probably all had to in order to.
And that's why it's so good. And that's
right.
why it's so good when that's happening. But that's I think for us, we just naturally just sort of shifted into this other thing that became authentic for us. So
100%. Well, guys, it's been awesome having you. I feel like that's a great place to end it. That came full circle to our conversation about AI in the beginning. And I kind of feel like the only hope to me of, future generations not just going to the AI machine and be like, make me a good song, is people like yourselves, people who are making art, getting out here and talking about it. Because I think and showing it and then doing it and going on stage, I think we get scared about the future of it all, but I think when a kid sees something like what you guys do on stage, or here's a conversation like this and here's about the real process and the journey and how it shapes you as a person, that's a whole different thing than going to the song machine and just spit me out a song, sir.
That's right.
And so anyway, I think it's really cool that you guys are drawing from the traditional roots of bluegrass and then just doing your own thing. And at 20 years in, I know the new record this week is 2020, right?
2020, 20 songs for 20 years.
Yeah. With 20 years in, it's like, and you won the Grammy in 2018, it's like, what's left to prove? Like, just throw all of your influences in a blender and create something new that, AI can't keep up with, and then go blow people's minds on stage. And
that's it. They won't be able to take that away from us anytime soon. I mean, people might want to watch a robot do some kind of
just for novelty.
Yeah, for novelty. But that would wear off, I think, pretty quick, and they're going to come right back around. We may even get to the point where we want to just leave our phones at home and go out and be people again. You know,
who knows?
And that would be, and music could be the catalyst for that, and it sometimes is. For some people, it really is, and you know, hopefully that just keeps catching on. I think people are going to need more of that, not less, as time goes on, because they're going to get tired of all of this stuff just inundating them. You know,
even if for 5 years it was only robots playing music, there'd eventually be a kid who's like, "What if I could do what the robots do?"
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Well, dudes, have a great show at the Opry, and look forward to the new record coming out.
Great
Thanks,
hanging
man.
with you, man. Thank
Yeah.
you so much.
Thank you.